Hello and welcome to Continual, the never-ending con. Today's panel is Mysteries, Magic, and Mayhem. And with me today are four wonderful writers, Colleen Gleason, Jennifer Estep, Casey Daniels, and Cynthia St. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have you here. Before we get into the questions that everybody wants to ask you guys, I'm going to ask you to do some introductions. Cynthia?
Hi, I am Cynthia St. confirmed cheese addict, crazy cat lady, and also writer. I write primarily paranormal mysteries, paranormal rom-coms, some regular mysteries without werewolves or vampires, but I mean, where's the fun in that? And occasionally a thriller. So glad to be here.
Cool. Casey?
I, as Casey Daniels, I write the Pepper Martin mysteries, which have ghosts in them. As Kylie Logan, I write straight mysteries, including my newest, which is The Secrets of Bones, which is about cadaver dogs. And as a whole lot of other people, including R.L. Stine, I have written lots of other things. So I've got the whole multiple personality thing going on.
Wow, R.L. Stine. Now that's cool. Jennifer?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Estep, and I write urban fantasy, young adult fantasy, and now epic fantasy. Some of my series are the Elemental Assassin series, the Crown of Shards series, and Mythos Academy.
Great. Colleen?
Hi, I'm Colleen. I write a variety of things. In fact, I'm fond of saying I'm a genre whore, but I'm mostly known for my Gardella Vampire Hunters series, which has vampires in it, some mystery and suspense. My Stoker and Holmes series, which is Sherlock Holmes's niece and Bram Stoker's sister in a steampunk London. And I also write the Wicks Hollow series, which is a mystery romance with ghost series, as well as the Lincoln's White House mystery series, which has no ghosts in it and no vampire hunters, even though Abe Lincoln is in it.
I know, that's such a shame. But you'd get into copyright infringement, so maybe it's not. Yeah,
Not gonna do that.
Too much. Casey, 30 names. What genre would
How many names?
Did you say something like 30 names?
No, 12, I think. 12, not 30. I can barely keep track of 12.
12 is bad enough or good enough. I don't know. Which genre was your starting point?
I started actually writing historical romance back in the Stone Ages when we chipped books onto slate tablets. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have since written contemporary romance. I've written young adult. I've written one children's book. But the whole time I was writing those other things, what I really liked to read was mysteries. And I finally came up with an idea because everything I thought of had been done. You know, you have to have a cool heroine with a cool profession. Well, you know, all the cake decorators and the cupcake bakers and the landscape architects were done. I finally came up with a cemetery tour guide. And that worked for me. So that's how I got into mysteries. Since then, the first Casey Daniels book was published in 2016, maybe, or maybe it was 6, who can say? But I've written 30 plus mysteries since then.
That's where the 30 stuck in my brain.
That's it, yep.
Yeah, but still 12 names. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, who am I? I don't know.
Yeah, Jennifer, what about you?
I actually started out writing paranormal romance about superheroes. Very fun and zany and over the top. That was my big time series. It's kind of like the old Batman show with Adam West or Wonder Woman with Linda Carter.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that there's a mystery element in all of my books. Like in the superhero series, it's like, who are the superheroes and what are their real identities? But I made it like so super obvious, like everybody has an alliterative name and like it's just so obvious who the heroes are. But there's a mystery thread I would say in most of my books, from the young adult to the urban fantasy. It just adds a little something extra to the stories, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you basically stayed in the paranormal vein and the mysteries were sort of a component of that.
Yeah, I mean, I like to read and to write books that have a little bit of everything in them, like action, adventure, danger, and romance. And for me, the mystery element and having the heroine, have to figure something out or find a treasure or whatever the mystery is just, a little something extra for readers.
Colleen, what about you?
Well, my first series was my Gardella Vampire Hunters series, which is basically Buffy during the time of Jane Austen. So she was a superhero trying to figure out, how to figure where to put her stake underneath her dress and how she could get it out really fast and what to do when she was chaperoned all the time. So there was always a mystery element in that series. It's an urban fantasy series, a historical urban fantasy series. I went on and I've done a bunch of other books. I really am a genre whore. But one of the series that I really had fun writing, well, I had fun writing them all, but one of the most well-known series for me is my Stoker and Holmes series, which has a steampunk element, the Sherlock Holmes element, it's got the alternate history, it's got vampires in it. And, because there's a Sherlock Holmes element, you've got Mina Holmes is always solving a mystery and telling everybody how she's doing it right. So it just kind of evolved for me. I didn't necessarily, the paranormal element came along with the alternate world, the steampunk world. It just kind of came with it. And I've been writing, actually, let me just go back. When I was writing the Gardella series, way back in, what was it, the early 2000s, 2007, 8, 9, my editor told me that someone at NAL, which is who I was writing for at the time, suggested I might want to consider writing a steampunk series. I had no idea what steampunk was, and so I had to go back to my hotel room and look up what steampunk was, and that kind of is what launched me into a more mystery sort of genre.
Did you read mysteries a lot? I know that Casey said she was reading a lot of mysteries all along. What about you?
I grew up reading Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden. My very favorite genre right now to read is historical mystery, which is why I'm writing the Lincoln's White House Mystery series, which is historical mystery. It's my very favorite series. So you have the beautiful world of the mystery and you layer a historical element over it. And then in my Stoker and Holmes series, I layer yet another layer of the paranormal and the steampunk over it. So it's kind of like mashing a whole bunch of genres together. And I feel very lucky to be able to write in those worlds.
Yeah. Jennifer, are you also a mystery reader or?
Oh, I love mysteries. I was going to say Trixie Belden was one of my favorites growing up, and Nancy Drew and, Hardy Boys and all, like, I would say, like, the classic mysteries that kids read. Encyclopedia Brown, do you guys remember those books?
Oh my God, yes. Does anybody remember the Three Investigators, Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators, or am I the only one?
Are those the guys that lived in a junkyard?
Yes!
Yes, I love those
them.
too.
Love them. Oh my gosh. Okay, Cynthia's next. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to distract, but not enough people know the Three Investigators, and they're one of my favorite series.
Somebody's going to have to write that up for the notes so that we can share it with our viewers. Cynthia, what about you? What was your start genre?
So my start genre actually was, I thought I was writing a paranormal rom-com. Quickly discovered that I kept trying to make the plot too intricate and mysterious, and the central element was not in fact about how these two people came together, but about why this gallery assistant's boss's lady friends kept dying, and usually that doesn't happen in a rom-com. So I started out thinking I was going to write a paranormal rom-com with it's the Tales from the Alpha Art Gallery, which is about an assistant and discovers that her boss is in fact a werewolf. So I thought that would be an interesting sort of element to think about. What would that be like to try to support somebody like that? But very quickly, like the other ladies, Nancy Drew, I mean, I was Nancy Drew. It was ridiculous. In addition to that, I loved reading anything Agatha Christie wrote, Poirot. I was just obsessed with sort of the methodical crafting of a plot like that. I read a lot of it, and I think that kind of migrated into my work, even though I wasn't setting out to do so.
So you didn't...
Oh, go ahead. Nope, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you found a book?
I was going to let her, you were going to ask another question, but I wanted to show you something. Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, when you're setting up your plots, even though you're looking at paranormal rom-com and oh my God, my boss is a werewolf, did you consciously you were talking about the way Agatha Christie is put together, etc. Did you try to apply that to the Tales of from the Alpha Art Gallery? Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Yeah. You know, it's really interesting because, as people often say, there's plotters and there's pantsers. And being both a mystery writer, I call myself a plantser, meaning I don't have a complete outline beginning to end. And I feel like with the Agatha Christie mystery, she probably did. They're super, super detailed, super intricate. Clues are very, very carefully planted. Mine tends to be a little bit more organic, but there are certain elements of her stories that I really like. A compelling lead character you can follow around, fun side characters who sort of contribute to the whole machine of things. But yeah, I adore her to this day.
Okay, Colleen, you had
I
something
just
you wanted to
grabbed- I
show
just
our
grabbed
viewers.
The three investigators books that I have on my shelf.
Yes, I
Aren't
totally
they-
remember
I mean,
getting
they're
those from the
so good.
library.
They're
Love
so
those
attractive.
covers.
Anyway, I didn't mean to distract us, but since we brought it up, so.
Yeah, and they remind me of the Nancy Drew covers that I remember.
They do.
from
They
my
really
youth.
do.
Yeah.
Is anybody watching the new Nancy Drew show on the CW? Because it is fantastic.
Is it really?
Is it?
Yes, I wasn't sure about the ghost element, and I thought, okay, it's going to be like teenagers and your typical CW show, but it is really, really good.
Oh, I'm
Especially,
so glad to know that. Totally gonna check
Speaking
that
of
out.
good shows, since you like the Agatha Christie's, you watched the David Suchet Poirot.
Oh yes.
So good.
Yes.
So
I
good.
adore him.
Isn't he amazing? He is the consummate epitome of Poirot.
Well, and what I love about him, and part of what I would say would inform some of the things, the way I approach a mystery, is he's so quirky and unapologetic about it. He likes what he likes. He doesn't like what he doesn't like. Its meals are very specific. He's very well groomed. There's no apology about being, having strange quirks, but also having this amazing ability to solve mysteries. And I love that about her characters, and him in particular.
So it sounds like with Cynthia, the idea of blending the mystery and the paranormal was conscious. Was that something the rest of you did consciously, or did it just sort of come in? I was hearing both, and I'm not sure I tracked exactly who said what. So we'll go with Jennifer and then Casey and then Colleen on that one.
With my Elemental Assassin series, the main character is an assassin, in case you don't know. So a lot of my books are really plot and action driven, and like in the very first book, Spider's Bite, somebody tries to kill her and she kind of has to figure out why and who they are and what they want. So for me, sort of the action of the mystery blends in with some of the other action of the books, like I just finished up writing a book that has like a little bit of a heist element in it. And so that's kind of almost sort of like a different mystery for the reader, because the reader is trying to figure out like how they're doing the heist.
Yeah.
But like as the author, I'm holding some of the information back because I want to do the big reveal at the end. So for me, I would say the mystery is just kind of another piece to the action puzzle.
Okay. Casey?
For me, the paranormal element was very conscious. As I said, I used to read mysteries. I wanted to write mysteries and couldn't find the right combination. And I actually applied for a job as a tour guide in a cemetery, a very beautiful historical cemetery. And I didn't get the job. But as I was leaving the cemetery, jumping out to take photographs, which is what I like to do in cemeteries, I had this idea that a tour guide in a cemetery would make a really cool detective. And so that's what I played with for a while. And of course, my first question to myself was, okay, who would be a tour guide in a cemetery? And the easy answer was, well, me, because I love history and I love genealogy and I love cemeteries and I love walking through old cemeteries and the art and the architecture and the history. But that's pretty darn boring. So I flipped that on its head and I came up with a detective, a heroine, who hates working at the cemetery. She hates it. This is the worst job on earth. Okay, so that was working. And as I was at the cemetery and interviewing with the head of whatever she was, the cemetery I was at, it's where President James A. Garfield is buried. And she said, you know, sometimes you may have to go and help out in the Garfield Memorial. And I said, okay. She said, no, you'd actually have to go into the memorial and help out. I said, okay. She said, but it's haunted.
You said, plus.
I think somewhere as I was developing Pepper Martin, this character, I thought, okay, what if the cemetery is haunted? So it was absolutely a very conscious decision. I have this cemetery, I have this heroine, and she's investigating mysteries for the ghosts in her cemetery and some other cemeteries too, as it turns out.
Oh, cool. Colleen, again, conscious or unconscious? Did it just happen, or did you go, yes, I need to bring these two together?
Well, obviously for my Stoker and Holmes series with the Sherlock Holmes element and the steampunk, that was already going to be part of the whole setup. But I also, being a Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden reader and a Scooby-Doo lover and a Three Investigators lover, love the idea of ghosts. So I came up with the idea of my Wicks Hollow series, which is basically a gothic mystery series with a romance overlay. It is a murder mystery with a romance, and there's sex in it. It's not like, there's actually sex in it, and a real ghost. That's
okay. Sex is okay.
I know, but when people think of cozy mystery, they don't necessarily think of sex. So just saying. So I wanted I wanted the kind of book that I wanted to read. I wanted a grown-up Nancy Drew Scooby-Doo series with real ghosts, kind of like I'm a big Barbara Michaels, Elizabeth Peters fan.
Oh yeah.
She had real ghosts. I want real ghosts. I want romance, and I want a murder. And that's what I put together in my Wicks Hollow series. And I love writing that series. It's contemporary, it's fun, it's today, it's in a small town. There's a murder every book, and there's a ghost in every book. It's kind of like in Murder, She Wrote, this little town had all these murders, same kind of thing, but we got ghosts too. It's kind of like Buffy and the Hellmouth, all the demons, all the murders, everything in one town. Anyway, yes, it was very conscious because that is something that I have been wanting to read, and there's just not enough of it out there. Somebody back in must have been the early 90s, Antoinette Stackenberg was writing that kind of book, which I loved. And somebody else, somebody was writing those books, and they're not writing them anymore. I mean, but people love that combination, the mystery, the romance, and the ghost. So yes, very conscious.
Okay, cool. How much do you ladies feel bound by the conventions of the various genres that you're throwing together? I mean, I'm hearing romance, I'm hearing rom-com, I'm hearing mystery, I'm hearing fantasy, okay? How much, each of these different subgenres and subgenres have their own conventions, have their own pacing. How much do you feel bound by that as you're developing the stories for your various series? Jennifer?
Well, I guess I would mostly consider myself a fantasy writer these days. Like I said before, I like books that have a little bit of everything in them, the action, the adventure, the romance. And the thing that I love about the fantasy genre is I always tell people I write fantasy books because I can make up the whole thing and I don't have to do any research.
Yeah, how's that working out for you?
I really do a little smidge of research sometimes, but not a lot. But anyway, the thing that I really like about fantasy is you can put any other genre in it that you want to. I mean, you could do a fantasy murder mystery or a fantasy romance or, fantasy noir or just whatever that you want to do. And like I said before, since I like to write books that have a little bit of everything in them, the fantasy genre for me is like the perfect genre to put in like all the things that I love, including the mystery element and the paranormal. And I think as long as your world building is good in a fantasy book, then, readers will go on that journey with you, whether it's more of a fantasy romance or a fantasy mystery or whatever other genre you're putting in with the fantasy element.
Cynthia?
So what Colleen said earlier really kind of spoke to me. She used the term genre horror. And I think it was sort of a blessing and a curse that when I set out to write my first book, I didn't really pay attention to where it was going to fit or sit on the shelf because I'd never thought about, okay, which kind of agent would I pitch to? Where would I put it on the shelf in a bookstore? I just wrote the story I wanted to read. And as with Colleen, there's mystery, there's actual werewolves, there's real sex. They don't close the door, you know. There's murder, multiple, and usually those are several genres. And having been a traditionally published author, like, and going at like the straight mystery side, people will tell you, oh, there's things you can't do in these particular genres. I'm kind of glad that when I started out, I really didn't pay attention to that. And it does make it harder sometimes to decide, well, what kind of cover am I going to put on it? Because certain things say, you know, they speak to, you know, cozy. Somebody told me once, if it's got a cat on it, it's cozy, you know, and which is funny because cats figure predominantly in some of my stories, but also murder and sex and werewolves. So making those decisions and distinctions can be a little difficult. I can't seem to help myself. I guess that's the real problem, is if I want a story that's got those things, that's going to come out either way. And I can't seem to stop myself from combining some of these elements. So
So you don't worry about the conventions that much.
I really don't. I really don't.
Yeah. Colleen?
Well, considering the fact that the very first book that I ever sold that was published, which is the first book in my Gardella series called The Rest Falls Away, was marketed as a historical paranormal romance, but was not a romance. And in fact, I got a lot of backlash because it really didn't end the way a romance would end. And I'm not going to tell you anything else. I kind of came out the gate already sort of bending genres. So I'm not in the romance genre because it doesn't end that way. But I will tell you that when I got to writing the YA series, the Stoker and Holmes series, that was when I really felt super comfortable with mushing together time travel, mystery, sci-fi, steampunk, fantasy. Everything is in there. It's like a stew. However, there are certain genre expectations that I always make sure, you know, to include. I'm always going to make sure that the murderer is found, that good conquers all, and that, you know, we have a happy for now, even if we don't have a happy ever after. Those are the main things, you know, in the genres. So I'm always going to pay attention to that, but mushing everything together, I don't really care. And also, I think, I'm sorry to say this, but because there are fewer shelves where books are categorized, it's easier to kind of bend the genres. But writing in YA, as I'm sure Jennifer knows, you can put anything together and you know, they just call it YA fantasy or YA fiction, and you know, it's the stew pot. So
I understand that in Europe they don't categorize fiction quite the same way we do, and sometimes genres have more greater sales because of it, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, I can tell you just quickly, my Gardella series is huge seller in Italy, and they categorize it as horror. We would call it paranormal. We would call it historical urban fantasy. They called it horror, and they put all the vampire stuff there. So yeah, in Europe it's different.
Yeah, I remember when Nita Blake, Laurel K. Hamilton was shelved in the horror section. I never understood it, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, Casey, what about you? Do you feel bound in any way by genre conventions, whether it be
I do, more than these other ladies, I have to say. And I think it's because, you know, I've published 65 novels so far, and I'm very conscious of marketing, and genre. And if I want to continue to publish with the big five and publish traditionally, which is what I want to do, I think you have expectations you have to meet. And at this point, I'm pretty good at meeting them, so I'm just doing it. I have to say I envy those of you who say you can mush things together and have a little bit of this and have a little bit of that. I picture a couple of editors having heart attacks if I tried to do that. So I think I'm a little more traditional in that sense.
Okay, there is no wrong, you know, there really is no wrong when you're...
Whatever works for you, works.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I just really quickly, to Casey's point, I think she's exactly right, though. The traditional publishers do want very genre, you know, they silo those genres pretty well. And I do write a straight mystery series for Kensington and a second one. So I totally get what you're saying, and I agree with you. The beauty of being able to do indie and hybrid publishing is that I can write my strict historical mystery series over here, and I can still write my genre mushing series over here, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to do both. And I'm sure that most everybody here does the same.
Okay. It seems to me though that, you know, people who are trying to, and this is not the writers here, and even Casey, I know this is not applying to you, that having something that sort of spans multiple genres seems to give you more layers to put in the fiction. Do you find that to be the case? Cynthia? What?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do. There's things you can do, like if adding the paranormal element to a mystery, for me was kind of interesting because it's like you deal with the typical things like somebody's going to die, there's going to be a dead body, there's going to be some, you know, confusion and investigation around that. But you add something like werewolves, and then you can start to explore a completely different avenue. You know, what was the reason this person died? How are werewolves created? What's, you know, you get to build an entire world around that. And in addition to exploring the intricacies of solving a mystery, you can then build in, you know, werewolf history and all kinds of interesting, you know, genetic things and scientific research and
Science-y!
Science. I'm such a nerd, but like when I approached that, that's something I wanted, something that was like somewhat scientifically sound as far as how werewolves are made. So I mean, that's definitely an element you may not. And I do write a straight mystery series, and thinking of my heroine there, like dealing with werewolf genealogy, like that's a completely different thing that was so fun to explore and create that in writing a straight mystery, you wouldn't get to do that, in addition to adding romance onto that. So then you have something like, well, what does sex with werewolves and humans look like? What are the rules? And, you know, and just in a straight mystery, those are not necessarily things you get to explore. So I think it does kind of make it rich and interesting, even if it is sort of a more difficult to peg the genre and market it and those things, that it is fun.
Yeah, even if you don't research, you frequently have to think about things that you wouldn't necessarily think about.
This is so true.
And follow the logic behind them.
Very true.
Jennifer? Yeah. Jennifer?
You know, I agree with Cynthia. Since my books have like so many different elements in them, it's almost like an onion. You know, you peel back the fantasy layer, and then there's the mystery layer. You peel back the mystery layer, and then there's the romance. You peel back the romance, and then there's the fight scenes. So I think having sort of all the different elements, you know, does increase the marketability of a book, because, you know, maybe you have somebody who loves paranormal romance and they wouldn't necessarily pick up a mystery, but, you know, if you're writing, you know, a mystery that has ghosts and fantasy and the romance element, maybe they'll check it out. And I think it's a good way to get crossover readers, you know, people who might not necessarily read in your genre, but, you know, like your story hook or like the character or the setting, and decide to pick up your book, and then pick up a couple more of your books, and then soon they've read your whole backlist, hopefully.
Hopefully, there's always
Hopefully.
that.
We always hope for that.
Colleen, you know, what about you? How does adding different genres or mixing different genres add to the depth and the layers of the fiction you're writing?
Yes, well, I mean, just exactly what Cynthia and Jennifer said. I mean, I write a straight historical mystery series, as I mentioned, the Lincoln's White House mystery series. And so when you layer in how they solve the mystery with the backdrop of what's available at the historical time period, you know, that always adds a layer. And so I did the same in my Stoker and Holmes series, even though it's in an alternate universe. You know, we have the steampunk world with a lot of gadgets. I'm still setting it in Victorian England. So when Mina Holmes is trying to solve this mystery, she's got the mystery, but she's solving it within this vacuum of, well, they can't test blood and they don't have fingerprints, and, you know, she has to be like a Sherlock Holmes. But then we also have this element of, you know, was there a vampire here? Or, you know, is there a super cool gadget she could use? So, you know, it's not NCIS. We're not talking contemporary. So again, yes, exactly what everyone else has said so far. Those layers are there, and that makes it more interesting, and that gives you more to the story. And I'm assuming for Cynthia, for example, that, you know, when somebody dies in your werewolf series, the fact that they're a werewolf plays into how they solve the murder, because I don't know, the blood's different, or I haven't read your books, but I will now because they sound really fun. But, you know, I'm sure that all plays in there, and that's how you build that world. I mean, I love to read regular contemporary mysteries, but when you add those other layers, it challenges your main character in a way that maybe modern day mysteries with all of our technology and forensics don't do.
Okay. Casey?
You know, it's strange. As I said, I came up with this idea for a heroine who worked at a cemetery, and then I added the ghosts. And to me, that seemed like the most natural thing in the world, because I have no doubt there are spirits. I've had some encounters that are interesting. So I was actually shocked the first time a review came out and called Dawn of the Dead, which was the first book in the series, a paranormal mystery. Because I went, what? It's a what? I just thought it was a mystery. But yes, it does open you up to new people. I've got people reading the books who like ghosts. Each book has a different ghost from a different era. So like Colleen with historical mystery, you know, does somebody like Elliot Ness? Well, we got an Elliot Ness ghost. So there's that era. Or people who like the 50s. Okay, I can take care of that. I've got a 50s ghost. So yes, I think the more you put in there, I think Colleen called it layers. The more layers there are, the much more likely you are to attract different readers who might never have just picked it up if it was, oh, here's a mystery about a heroine in a cemetery.
Okay.
So, good stuff.
Okay, everybody is using the fantastic, however it's described, whether it be fantastic because of the science and an alternate history, say a steampunk situation, or ghosts or werewolves or whatever. And I know that everybody has their own mythology for their series. How much world building did you do before you sat down to write? Or did you sort of go, oh, I need to fix this here, and do it as you went along? So, Casey, yours seems to be most grounded in your experience. How much additional world building did you have to do for this?
Well, let me just say this can get you in a lot of trouble. World building, because you set the rules, right? In book 1, in book 2, in book 3, and then in book 4 you come to some situation where you go, but I need the ghost to do blah blah. Oh no, he can't, because I've said in book 2 the ghost can't do this. So it can be tricky. For me, I don't have to do werewolf genealogy, fortunately, or anything like that. But you know, my ghosts need my heroine because they can't touch things, they can't move things. But like I said, then you get to a point where she can only be saved by the ghost who can do da da da, and you go, oh, come on. So there is some world building, although again, as I said, for me, this is very real. So I'm only going by how I think things work. And that's, I guess, what we're all going by, because we get to make the rules. We are the goddesses of our universe, and we get to decide how these things work.
I love being the goddess, yes.
It's good to be goddess.
It's good to be goddess. Jennifer, you have more of a fantasy vibe going, you know, with your various series. And I know you were saying, I make it up. So, but how much world building did you have to do? Even if you don't do a lot of research, how much of that do you have to do? And how much did you do beforehand?
I have to admit, I'm a total pantser. For me, I write in first person, so it's all about the heroine, who she is, what she wants, you know, what her magic is, how she uses her magic to defeat the bad guys. So usually I think about the heroine for a long time, and then I think about the turning points of the story, like, you know, what's the opening chapter about, what's like at the third mark that drives the action to the middle, what happens at the middle that drives the action to the end, and then how does she use her magic in the big fight scene at the end. And kind of once I have that in mind, I just sit down and start writing. And I will say that my rough drafts are like really, really bad. It's almost like a detailed outline. because I find out if I outline or plan a lot before I start writing, I get kind of bored with it. I feel like I've already written the book. So for me, like the second and the third and the fourth drafts, or when I go in and really think about the world building and layer things in and really build out the magic system. And, you know, we were talking before about like painting yourself into a corner with the world building, which is really easy to do. So I try to give the world building some structure, but not make it so limited that like something unexpected can't happen. And then I always kind of cheat a little bit too. And I'll put a line in, usually in a book somewhere in the series, saying, you know, magic has many unexpected twists and turns and can do anything we want it to. So that's kind of like my cheat code in my books.
Oh,
To
you
get
got
that.
a jail-free card,
card.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jail-free card. I love it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cynthia, what about you? I mean, how much did you world build the world of your werewolves and vamps beforehand?
So I don't know. I am also kind of a quasi pantser. I don't know if Jennifer's experienced this sort of thing. I didn't do a ton before I sat down to write it. I kind of had an idea of who the heroine was. I also write in first person, so it's kind of about her story, her journey, what she's discovered. I knew werewolves were going to be a part of it. I didn't have a very sound idea at the time as far as how werewolves are made and those kind of things. But it seems like at certain points in my experience, the story sort of guides me to the world building I need. Like, this particular thing happened. Why is that? What is this rule? How come, you know, she could do this, but not this? It kind of hints at something, and I'm like, oh, that's why, because werewolves, you know, are based on recessive and dominant genes. Of course, you know, that's why so-and-so didn't know they were a werewolf. Those kind of things. What I will say is I did do some historical imagining for mine. Like, instead of building the current world, because it's set in current day, I kind of went back and said, okay, well, what have the rules been through history? In the Tales from the Alpha Art Gallery series, the thing that I kind of pegged on was most like tortured artists you've thought of, like Vincent van Gogh, are actually werewolves, which is why they're so. And most famous writers are actually vampires, very self-obsessed, obsessed with eternity, like Oscar Wilde and things like that. And they've
All of us, right?
grudge.
Yeah.
So that I knew before I went in is, okay, werewolves are artists, writers are vampires, right? And I, based on that, then I can kind of backload and front load and decide, okay, so in this current world now today, how do those rules still apply and how would that look?
Okay, well, that's cool. That's an interesting way of doing it. Colleen, what about you? What kind of world building did you do before you dove in? Or did you not do any and went, oh, darn?
Well, for the I have like 4 different worlds I've written, but 2 of them are historical based. One is my Gardella Vampire series, and one is my Stoker and Holmes. Both of them being set in historical time periods. I did research on the historical time period. The Gardellas, the original Gardellas, are set in 1820, 1821, and the Stoker and Holmes are set in 1890, right around there, 1889, 1890, in an alternate world. So I did a lot of research for the actual historical time period. In the Gardellas, what I did, because they're set before Dracula was written, right around the time, there's a whole, many people probably know the story about John Polidori, who wrote the first story about vampires. It was right around that time, and actually John Polidori appears in one of my books. I decided to make my vampire mythology be very similar to the basic accepted vampire. My vampires don't sparkle. They're not nice guys. You know, they don't like garlic, you know, that kind of a thing. I decided purposely to do that and make my vampires pretty. They have descended from Judas of Iscariot. That's one element I brought in, but I decided to go from there. What I had to build was the world of my vampire hunter. And it's not the Buffy world where there's only one slayer. There's a whole contingent of them and so on. But also for my Stoker and Holmes series, the same sort of thing. We had Bram Stoker's sister in the series, and Bram is writing Dracula at the time. So I have my vampire mythology, you know, trundles off from the Gardellas and is built around the Dracula vampire mythology for obvious reasons. So I did do that. I researched the historical, but then I layered in, like in my steampunk world, electricity is illegal. Everything runs on steam in London. Electricity is illegal. And there's, you know, I built around all of that. So we have a whole underground, you know, dark, electrical, people are selling batteries and stuff, underground. So, it all kind of builds around. So to answer your question, I did the historical research first, came up with the basic vampire and, paranormal element mythology, but then I'm a pantser as well. And I'm, developing the world as I go. Then for me, once I'm in that world, if there's a question that has to be answered, I just know the answer, because I'm already in the world. I don't have to think about it. It's just the world's already there. I don't know if that makes sense. It probably does
It's
to
a
the other writers.
subconscious thing with you.
It's like you already know the world's formed, and if somebody asks me the question, well, how can they do that? It's like, oh, it's this. I don't have to think about it. But I love what Jennifer does. Jennifer's get out of jail free card. Like, hey, you never can explain everything. And I have used
magic.
There's not always an explanation. So, yeah, I don't even know who's the murderer until about 2/3 of the way through any book I write anyway, and I have to go back and figure it and put in the clues. I'm such a pantser.
As long as you find it out by the end, you're good, right?
I have to butt in here and say I'm the only plotter in the group. I'm a plotter. So there you go.
That's okay.
I wish I were a plotter. Let me tell you, it makes my life so much easier.
It gets rid of some of the anxiety.
Yeah, it does. It does. One question, you've all talked about how having a genre spanning book opens you up to other, fans. The fans of mystery might find you, but so will the fans of ghost stories. So will the fans of werewolf stories. Have you ever experienced any difficulties, in either advertising or finding your audience, or even for those of you who are traditionally published, being told by the marketing department, we don't know where to put this book? Have you experienced any of that, or is that a myth? So, Casey?
I have not. So there's a short answer to your question. No.
Okay. Cynthia?
Absolutely, which kind of goes back to the beauty of being a hybrid author. My mysteries are traditionally published, and everything I do that's paranormal mystery or paranormal rom-com is self-published. Again, I found that if you love your stories and you love the characters and are willing to kind of get out there and build your fan base and talk to readers and kind of introduce them to, yes, it's a mystery, yes, there's sex in it, yes, there are werewolves in it, yes, there are vampires. They love a lot of those things. And although you have to do a little bit more of the work yourself and be kind of creative as far as how am I going to get this in front of the people who want to read it, I found that there are people who love to read these kind of things. I will absolutely say from the traditional side, they will tell you, you can't have a swearing, talking unicorn in your book. Nobody's going to read that stuff. But it's funny because those end up being some readers' favorite characters. And I love having both sides of things so that I can write whatever the heck I want, and write a swearing, talking unicorn in one book series, but then also, appeal to a traditional audience as well with a straight mystery. So I have experienced that difficulty though.
Okay, Colleen, what about you?
Yeah, I've had a problem with people crossing over, partly because my first series was the Gardella Vampire Hunters, and then I ended up writing a series for Avon, which is not really a mystery series. It's a post-apocalyptic or dystopian paranormal romance series. It was under a different name because they didn't want it, because it was different than the Gardellas. They didn't think the readers would follow me. And, there are people who read the Gardellas, who read the Stoker and Holmes, who read the post-apocalyptic series, which is called The Heroes of New Vegas, and they don't necessarily cross. There are many readers of mine who will read anything I write, but there are many who will, I only love vampire novels. I don't like anything with vampires. I'm only going to read your Wicks Hollow book, that kind of a thing. So, there's definitely not always the crossover, but there's always that core group of readers who like the way Colleen Gleason tells a story, so they'll read anything she writes. But there's still a group that won't cross over. So,
Jennifer, what about you?
I haven't really experienced it from a publisher saying, oh, we don't know what to do with this. And, I do both the traditional and the indie publishing. I think like Colleen said, a lot of it is just building up your author brand and your voice. Like if somebody picks up a Jennifer Estep book, then they know what they're going to get kind of a thing. And within that, you know, some people like the YA series better. Some people like the Elemental Assassin series better. So it just kind of depends on what fantasy that they want to read. Every once in a while, though, I will get kind of like a snarky comment from somebody, either like in real life or on the internet. Oh, you know, I don't read fantasy books. I only read real books or important books. And why don't you write one of those? And it's kind of like, okay, you don't know what you're missing. So I get a little bit of that sometimes, but not so much, you know, we don't know what to do with your book.
Yeah. When you get that, you sort of want to violate the terms of this panel, which is kind of PG. You know, I was sitting there going, I have something to say to that, and it's a sign, but never mind. Anyway, one last question before we get into our lightning round, and that is, what advice would you give to writers who want to write in more than one genre at the same time? Jennifer?
I always tell people, no matter what genre they're writing, to have fun with it. You know, nobody is going to write your book for you. You're the one going to be sitting at the computer for hours and hours and hours on end. So try to have as much fun with the process as you can. Like, for example, you know, thrillers and psychological thrillers have become really popular in recent years. But if you don't like those and you don't like to read those, you're probably not going to like writing one very much. So don't necessarily chase the hot genre or what you think you might be able to sell to a publisher. You know, write something that you're interested in, because it will definitely show in the final product, and it'll make your book a lot better for readers.
Okay. Colleen?
I think if you're going to write across genres, I love what Jennifer said, definitely have fun. Because if you're not going to enjoy reading it or writing it, you know, who's going to enjoy reading it? But I also think that, you know, you probably want to pick a genre that you're going to be a little more heavily invested in. For example, if you want to do a paranormal mystery, make sure that you meet the requirements of a mystery, which is you got to have suspects, you got to have a villain, you got to have a good mystery, you got to have some good clues, you build on a certain genre and then build your layers over it, but have a certain genre for your base. It's just easier, I think, to learn how to tell a story if you are developing it that way. But by all means, have fun, because she's right. You know, if you don't have fun, you're going to be at the computer for hours. If you're not having fun, nobody else will either.
That's true. Casey?
I think you can write over multiple genres. We've all proved that. But again, I'm coming strictly from traditional. I think if you're going to write over multiple genres, you should expect to have more than one name, which is why I have 12, although I'm only using 3 at the moment. So I think, you know, that's how I became Kylie Logan, because my Casey Daniels books had ghosts in them. And when I sold a series that was strictly mystery, the publisher was worried if the Casey Daniels name was on it, people would expect ghosts to be in it. So I became Kylie Logan for that, and have been for a lot of books. So don't be surprised when they say, hey, be someone else.
Okay. Cynthia?
I guess I would kind of echo what Colleen said, in that you can write across multiple genres, know the rules of the genres, and know why and when you're breaking them. If you're going to break them, if you're going to cross those boundaries, know why you're doing it and how it supports the story. And then sort of appending to that, my advice to anybody kind of coming up in this is, write the story only you can tell. So whatever it is, if it's something that has paranormal, you know, romance elements and mystery elements, there's a reason you want to tell a story like that. Access that, pay attention to that, and be true to that.
That's good advice. Good advice from everyone. Okay, before we go, I'd like everyone to tell our audience what books you've got coming out, what you've got on the burner now, and where they can find you on the web. Cynthia?
So easiest place to find me is my website, cynthiastaubin.com. I'm also all over the Facebooks. I'm a total social media spaz, and you may or may not see like how much cheese I consume, but I also do a decent job of posting new releases. I have a book in Robin Peterman's Magic and Mayhem world called Unwitchable that's coming out in June. In July, we're going to be re-releasing the Witches of Port Townsend series. And then in October, the final installment of the Tales from the Art Gallery, Alpha Art Gallery series, Love Lies, is coming out. So that's
It's ending? The series is ending?
It was always going to be a trilogy.
Okay. Jennifer?
Oh gosh, let me see. I don't even know what day it is now. What do I have coming out? I am
It's
working.
June.
It feels like, I don't know, forever.
2020 is the longest year I can ever remember.
Yes, I don't know how the days can go by so fast, but then like the months just like drag and drag on. But anyway, right now I am working on Elemental Assassin number 19. Yeah. So I'm hoping to self-publish that one in the spring. I also am doing a new trilogy in my Crown of Shards epic fantasy world. The first book in that new trilogy should be out next summer. It's kind of, we'll see what happens with everything going on. I also am going to have The Beauty of Being a Beast. It's a kind of a feminist take on Beauty and the Beast, and that's going to appear in a German short story anthology in October of this year. So I have a lot of different things in the works.
Okay, great, great. Casey?
My newest book is actually under the Kylie Logan name. It's called The Secrets of Bones. It's the second in the Jazz Ramsey mysteries. Nothing paranormal, straight mystery. She does train and handle, and Jazz trains and handles cadaver dogs. So at least we got some decomp going on. So that would make us all happy. That was just out a few weeks ago. I have a new series starting at the end of September. It's called The Haunted Mansion Mysteries. I'm writing those as, who am I writing those as? I'm writing those as Lucy Ness. As you can tell from the title, there is a ghost in them. The first book is called Haunted Homicide. It's about a woman who takes a job as a business manager in a women's club, and there's an old speakeasy in the basement and a ghost in the speakeasy. So the first book in that one is Haunted Homicide. The second book is something else, Phantoms and Felonies. I just found out the title today, so I'm a little rusty.
Yeah, writers don't always control that, do we?
No, we do not, unfortunately. So I'm back with a few ghosts, but I will still be writing the Jazz Ramsey mysteries. I'm working on the third one of that now. And I have another straight mystery, no ghosts series I'll be starting after that.
Oh, cool. We'll be looking forward to it. Colleen?
I just had a release a couple months ago in my Lincoln's White House series, Murder at the Capitol. That's straight mystery, no ghosts, Abraham Lincoln, no vampire hunters, very historically accurate. But if you like the Civil War, it's a good mystery series to check out and learn about the Civil War. The fifth book in my Wicks Hollow mystery series, which is Ghost Romance and Murder, will be out in August, God willing. It's called Sinister Stage, and it takes place around a community theater production in a haunted theater. Of course, there are ghosts in the theater. I actually have the second book in my Wicks Hollow series is a woman who buys a bed and breakfast that turns out to be a haunted speakeasy. So there's a theme going on here, so that's fun. And then I have another new series that's starting a year from now-ish, really super fun. It's a cozy mystery series, no paranormal elements, set in the 30s, and the amateur detective is Agatha Christie's housekeeper.
Oh.
Downton Abbey meets Agatha Christie, you know, kind of a mystery series. And I had the most fun writing the first book in the series. So that'll be out in about a year or so.
Okay. Let me just get everybody's website again. Colleen, your website?
ColleenGleason.com, and I'm on Facebook at ColleenGleason.author.
Okay. Casey?
I have two websites right now, CaseyDaniels.com and KylieLogan.com. That's going to be changing very soon. Do I remember the name of the new website? I do not. But I'm mushing all the me's into one website.
Okay. That's
on
good.
Facebook under both those names.
Okay. Cynthia?
It's CynthiaSt.com. The Saint is not spelled out, so it looks like Cynthia Staubin, which I guess, but that's the easiest way to find me, find the website. And again, anything social media, Instagram, Pinterest, Cynthia St. you will find me doing something spazzy, I guarantee you.
Great. Jennifer, your website?
my website is just jenniferestep.com, and then I'm on Facebook and Twitter.
Great. Okay. Thank you all for a great panel. I really enjoyed it. And thank you, viewers, from Continual, the con that never ends.